It was a Tuesday afternoon in Sacramento when everything changed for the Martinez family. Sofia Martinez, 32, worked double shifts at the county hospital as a nurse. Her daughter Emma, just 4 years old, stayed with Sofia's mother during the day while Sofia worked. The apartment complex on Riverside Drive was old but well maintained, filled with working families who knew each other's names and watched out for each other's children. That particular Tuesday, Sofia had kissed Emma goodbye at 6 in the morning, promising to be home by dinner. Emma had clung to her mother's neck a little longer than usual. "Mama, will you bring me something?" she'd asked in that small voice. "I'll bring you a big hug." Sofia had laughed, not knowing those would be the last normal words they'd exchange for a very long time. The apartment building had 24 units spread across 3 floors. The Martinez family lived on the second floor, Unit 2C. Their home was modest but filled with love. Pictures covered every wall, Emma's drawings decorated the refrigerator, and in the corner of the living room, on a small wooden shelf, stood a statue of the Virgin Mary. It had belonged to Sofia's grandmother in Mexico. When she passed away 5 years earlier, the statue made the journey north. Sofia prayed before it every morning without fail, asking for protection over her daughter and strength to face each day alone. It started at 2:47 in the afternoon. Mrs. Chen from Unit 2A would later tell investigators she smelled smoke while folding laundry. She opened her door and saw it seeping from under the Martinez's door across the hall. She screamed and pulled the fire alarm. Within minutes, the hallway filled with residents rushing toward the stairs. The smoke was already thick and black, pouring from the Martinez apartment in waves that made people's eyes water and throats burn. Marcus Webb, who lived on the 3rd floor, was one of the first outside. He pulled out his phone and started recording, something people do instinctively now during emergencies. Others gathered on the street, counting heads, making sure everyone was out. That's when Mrs. Chen screamed again, "Emma, the little girl is still inside." Sofia's mother had stepped out just 10 minutes earlier to pick up groceries. Emma had been napping on the couch. The fire department arrived within 6 minutes. Captain Robert Hayes was first off the truck. Neighbors surrounded him immediately, shouting about the child trapped on the 2nd floor. Flames were already visible through the windows, angry and orange, consuming everything. Hayes assigned his team quickly. 2 firefighters would go in while others worked the hoses from outside, but then something happened that no one could explain. At least 7 witnesses, standing in different positions on the street, saw the same thing through the smoke-darkened window of Unit 2C. Marcus Webb's phone captured it first. Through the window, visible despite the smoke and flames, was a figure. But it wasn't little Emma, standing alone. There was a woman with her, a woman in flowing blue robes, bent over the child, her arms wrapped protectively around Emma's small body. The woman seemed to glow, not with fire, but with a soft white light that pushed back against the darkness of the smoke. "Oh, my God," Marcus whispered, his phone trembling in his hands. "Do you see that?" Mrs. Chen had collapsed to her knees in the sidewalk. "It's the Virgin Mary," she sobbed. "It's her. She's protecting the baby." Others saw it too. David Richardson, an accountant who'd never set foot in a church. The Gonzalez family from Unit 1B. Even old Mr. Patterson, who'd lived in the building for 30 years and considered himself a practical man, stood frozen, staring at the impossible sight. The figure in blue held Emma close. Through the smoke, Witnesses said they could see Emma's small face pressed against the woman's shoulder, calm, not crying, not screaming. The woman's face, partially visible through the haze, was serene, almost luminous. Her hands, gentle but firm, cradled the child as flames licked closer. Captain Hayes and his team burst through the apartment door. The heat hit them like a physical wall. The living room was an inferno. Hayes radioed his position, calling for backup. They had minutes at best before the floor gave way. Hayes pushed through the smoke, following thermal imaging that showed a small heat signature near the far wall. When he reached the living room, he found Emma sitting on the floor in the corner, exactly where witnesses said the woman in blue had been. The child was completely unharmed, not a burn on her body. Her clothes weren't even singed. She sat calmly, almost peacefully, her small hands folded in her lap. But there was no woman, no one in blue robes, no one at all. Hayes scooped Emma up and ran. The ceiling collapsed behind them as they burst through the doorway. Outside, the crowd erupted. Mrs. Chen reached for Emma, crying and praying in Mandarin. Others crossed themselves. Marcus Webb stood holding his phone, watching the footage replay over and over, unable to process what he'd recorded. When Sofia arrived 30 minutes later, still in her scrubs from the hospital, she found Emma wrapped in a blanket, drinking juice, completely fine. The firefighters had no explanation for how the child survived. The corner where she'd been sitting was surrounded by flames on 3 sides. The temperature in that room had exceeded 800 degrees. Nothing else in the apartment survived intact, except one thing. When investigators sifted through the ruins the next day, they found it in the rubble. The statue of the Virgin Mary from the wooden shelf. It had fallen during the fire, landing near where Emma had been found. The statue's paint was intact. The blue robes hadn't faded. The face remained serene, and clutched in the statue's marble hands, pressed against its chest, was a small scrap of Emma's blanket, the one she'd been napping with. The same blanket witnesses said the woman in blue had wrapped around the child. But statues don't move. Statues don't hold children. Statues don't shield them from flames. Yet 7 people saw what they saw. Marcus Webb's video showed what it showed. And Emma Martinez, 4 years old, walked out of an inferno without a single burn. Captain Hayes, a firefighter for 20 years who'd seen everything, stood in the ruins that evening. He picked up the statue carefully, turning it over in his hands. "I don't know what happened here," he told the investigator beside him, "but something did, something I can't explain." The statue of the Virgin Mary now sits in a glass case at St. Teresa's Church in Sacramento. People come from all over to see it, to pray before it, to touch the glass, and hope for their own miracles. Sofia visits every Sunday with Emma, who's now 7 years old. Emma doesn't remember much about that day, just warm arms holding her, a soft voice singing, and the smell of roses in the smoke. When people ask Sofia what she believes happened, she simply says, "My grandmother's prayers were answered. The Virgin Mary kept her promise to protect my daughter." And 7 witnesses will tell you they saw it happen with their own eyes.